The hospital lobby was always too quiet for a child, filled with the hushed tones of nurses, the occasional beeping of machines, and the soft shuffle of rubber soles against the floor. Yet in the far corner, near the tall glass windows that looked out into the courtyard, a little girl sat in her wheelchair, her gaze fixed intently on the world beyond the glass. Outside, a young couple moved gracefully beneath the blooming cherry blossoms, their bodies swaying gently in time with music only they could hear. To her, it looked like magic, like the world had stopped just to watch them spin. She clasped her hands together tightly, her knuckles pale, her heart aching with a longing she barely understood. She had seen dancers before on television, in music videos, even in the occasional performance streamed to the children's ward, but never had she seen it so close, so alive. The sight stirred something deep inside her, something that pushed her past the usual timid silence she lived in. That was the moment he walked by. Tall, broad-shouldered, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, the man looked as though he didn't belong in a place like this. His shoes clicked against the tiles, each step measured, each glance cold and businesslike. He was a CEO, everyone whispered about him. He was the kind of man who made decisions that moved millions, who signed contracts that changed futures, yet carried himself with the loneliness of someone who lived far away from all the laughter he passed. She watched him approach, her small fingers trembling as they gripped the armrest of her wheelchair. For a moment, fear held her tongue. He looked too important, too untouchable, like someone who wouldn't hear her even if she shouted. But then she thought of the couple outside, their bodies moving like sunlight in motion, and her chest tightened with courage she didn't know she had. As he passed her chair, she reached out, tugging softly on the sleeve of his jacket. The man stopped abruptly, frowning down in surprise. Very few people dared to touch him. His brows furrowed as he opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, her small, wavering voice reached him. "Can you teach me to dance?" The question hung between them like a fragile piece of glass, ready to shatter with the wrong answer. He blinked, caught off guard. A part of him wanted to smile at the absurdity of it, him, who hadn't danced in years, him, who had no business teaching anyone, much less a little girl in a wheelchair. But then his eyes met hers. They weren't pleading eyes. They were hopeful. And hope was something he had long forgotten existed. For the first time in years, his lips curved upward, not into the polite, practiced smile of a CEO, but into something warm, unguarded, and real. "All right," he said softly, almost to himself. "Let's see what we can do." The room they chose was nothing special. It was one of the hospital's therapy spaces, lined with parallel bars, stacks of foam mats, and posters showing smiling children doing exercises. To the girl, though, it might as well have been a ballroom. She rolled her wheelchair in slowly, her small hands gripping the rims with quiet excitement. The CEO stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, his tie loosened, his jacket folded neatly on a chair. He felt oddly exposed here, far away from the armor of boardrooms and conference calls. There were no shareholders to impress, no rivals to outmaneuver, only a fragile child looking up at him with eyes that sparkled with trust. "So, dancing," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll admit, I'm a little out of practice." The girl giggled, her laugh light and contagious. "That's okay," she said. "I've never danced at all." Her honesty disarmed him. For a moment, he was silent, staring at the tiny figure before him. She was so small, so frail-looking, yet she held herself with a bravery he envied. Taking a slow breath, he walked to the corner where a small speaker rested. He tapped his phone, and soft music filled the room, a gentle piano melody that seemed to wrap around them like a whisper. "All right," he said quietly, returning to her side. "Dancing isn't just about feet. It's about rhythm, about feeling the music in your heart." He placed his hand gently over his chest and tapped in time with the melody. Then he took her small hand and guided it to rest over her own chest. "Do you feel it?" Her eyes widened, and she nodded. "Yes, like a beat inside me." "Exactly." His voice softened, almost reverent. "That's where the dance begins." Slowly, he moved behind her wheelchair, placing his hands on the handles. With careful precision, he began to guide her chair in wide, graceful arcs across the floor, turning gently, swaying in time with the music. At first, the girl gasped in surprise, clutching the arms of the chair. But then her fear melted into delight, and she began to laugh, her head tilting back, her arms lifting into the air as though she were flying. "Look at you," he murmured, his own lips curving into a smile he couldn't contain. "You're dancing." She twirled her hands, mimicking the elegance of ballerinas she had only seen on TV. He adjusted the chair's movement to match, spinning lightly, then gliding smoothly across the room. Together they created a rhythm all their own, a dance that required no steps, no legs, only imagination and heart. Minutes stretched into something timeless. For him, the world of profits and losses, meetings and mergers, ceased to exist. There was only the music, the laughter, and the way this child's joy filled the air more brightly than any applause he had ever received. When the song ended, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes glowing. "Can we do it again?" she begged. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, his answer was simple, uncalculated, and true. "As many times as you want." The ballroom glittered that night, bathed in golden light that spilled from crystal chandeliers high above. It was the annual charity gala, the kind of event where gowns sparkled like jewels and tuxedos gleamed as though stitched with pride itself. Wealthy donors mingled, champagne flutes clinking, their conversations a hum of business, philanthropy, and polite laughter. The CEO had attended countless events like this, yet tonight felt different. His usual sense of isolation, the hollow ache that followed him even in crowds, was gone. Instead, his pulse beat with anticipation, his gaze fixed not on the board members or the investors, but on the small figure waiting nervously by the edge of the stage. The girl. Her dress was pale blue, satin and lace flowing gently over her lap, her wheelchair adorned with tiny ribbons that shimmered beneath the lights. A nurse had curled her hair, and a delicate tiara rested on her head, making her look like the princess she had always dreamed of being. But even with all the adornment, her eyes betrayed her nerves. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, bending down so they were eye to eye. She hesitated, biting her lip. "What if they laugh at me?" He shook his head firmly, his voice steady. "They won't. Tonight, they're going to see what I see." He paused, his expression softening. "A girl who knows how to dance." Her eyes widened, and slowly, she nodded. The MC's voice rang out, announcing an unexpected performance. The crowd hushed, their curiosity piqued. When the spotlight fell on the stage, there was a collective murmur of surprise, the famously untouchable CEO, pushing a little girl in a wheelchair toward the center. The music began, a gentle swell of violins, a melody that filled the room like a promise. At first, the movement was simple. He wheeled her in slow circles, swaying gently in time with the rhythm. But then, just as he had done in the therapy room, he began to guide her chair in elegant arcs, spinning, twirling, gliding across the stage. The girl lifted her arms gracefully, her hands painting shapes in the air as though she were a ballerina commanding her own stage. Gasps rippled through the audience. Then, silence deep and reverent, as though the entire room held its breath. No one saw a wheelchair anymore. They saw a dance. They saw joy, resilience, and beauty woven together in motion. The girl's laughter rang out, bright and unrestrained. It echoed off the walls, filling every corner of the grand ballroom. The CEO's heart swelled at the sound, his own smile unguarded, unforced, shining with a pride he had never felt for any of his worldly achievements. When the music reached its final note, he spun her chair one last time, stopping with a flourish. She raised her arms high, her cheeks flushed with exhilaration. The silence broke into thunderous applause. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears from their eyes. The girl looked up at him, her eyes shimmering. "We really danced," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We really did." And in that moment, beneath the golden lights and the roar of applause, the lonely CEO no longer felt lonely. For the first time in years, he wasn't defined by titles, power, or wealth, he was defined by something far greater. He was someone who had given, and received, the gift of dance.